Everyone tells you to stay calm, but when life throws punches, advice means nothing. Real strength, that's when you feel the storm, yet move like it never touched you. That's power. That's freedom. I used to believe that strength meant force. That control came from tightening my grip on everything, my time, my schedule, the people around me. I thought the more I could command, the more peace I would feel. But peace never came from control. It came from detachment. And that was the hardest thing to learn. Because we are conditioned to react, to engage, to fight back. We live in a noisy world. Everyone has an opinion, and most people throw theirs around like weapons. If you're not grounded, you'll be pulled into every storm. You'll start living at the mercy of the next comment, the next insult, the next little problem. That's not power. That's dependency. True control begins the moment you decide not to take everything personally. When you can hear the noise, feel the pressure, and still return to your center, that's when you know you've built something real inside. That's what I call the nothing bothers me mindset. It's not about being cold. It's not about being passive. It's about choosing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. It's the skill of letting people be wrong about you without needing to fix it. It's smiling when they expect you to explode. It's walking through chaos without losing your balance. And it is a skill, one you build slowly, deliberately. You start by creating space between stimulus and response. That space is your power. Someone says something rude. You don't react. You breathe. You assess. You ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Will this matter in 5 days, 5 hours? Most of the time it won't. Detachment isn't apathy. It's awareness. It's realizing that you don't have to fight every battle just because someone invites you into one. You don't have to absorb other people's emotions like they're your responsibility. You are not a sponge. You are a mirror. What doesn't serve you doesn't stay. That shift changed everything for me. I stopped needing to be right. I stopped needing to be loud. I stopped needing to win every interaction. Instead, I started listening more, observing more, walking away more. And strangely enough, that's when people started respecting me more, because nothing is more intimidating than someone who cannot be rattled. Nothing is more magnetic than someone who walks in peace no matter what the room feels like. I trained this mindset like a muscle. Every time I didn't react, I got stronger. Every time I chose calm over chaos, I proved to myself that I was in control, not the world around me. And the more I practiced, the less life shook me. Things still happened, people still tested me, but I moved through it differently. I didn't absorb it. I didn't carry it. I let it pass. And that is the root of real power, not in controlling others, but in mastering yourself. For a long time, I kept waiting for life to slow down, for things to get easier, for people to be kinder, more understanding, less reactive. I thought if I worked hard enough, was kind enough, patient enough, the world would return the favor with peace. But it didn't. And eventually I realized something that changed me forever. The world doesn't owe me peace. It never did. It's not designed to be calm. It's designed to keep moving, to push, to pull, to demand your attention. There will always be noise, always pressure, always something unexpected around the corner. So I stopped waiting, and I started building. If I wanted peace, I had to create it. Not out there, but in here. Peace is not a condition. It's a discipline. It's a decision I make every morning before the world wakes up, to protect my mind, to guard my focus, to stay grounded, even when everything around me is spinning. There's no peace in waiting for people to behave, no peace in needing everything to go your way. Because as long as your inner world is tied to your outer conditions, you'll never feel stable. You'll be chasing peace like a shadow, always close, never within reach. So I made a shift. I stopped blaming the outside. I stopped needing people to understand me, agree with me, praise me, or walk gently around my boundaries. I stopped expecting calm to arrive. Instead, I became it. Now, when things go wrong, I breathe. When someone speaks out of turn, I don't absorb it. When a plan collapses, I adjust. Because peace isn't about perfection. It's about presence. And presence isn't given. It's trained. It starts with how you wake up, how you speak to yourself, what you feed your mind, what you let into your body, your space, your time. I became ruthless about what I allowed to touch my energy, because everything you let in, you carry. I started choosing what to carry and what to leave behind. And slowly, peace stopped being a hope. It became a habit, not because life got quieter, but because I did. That's the secret. You don't wait for stillness. You become the stillness. You walk through the noise differently. You learn to hold your posture when others collapse. You create such a strong inner foundation that no storm can shake you from the inside out. And when people ask, "How are you so calm?" you smile, because they think it's natural. But you know better. It was a choice. It was work. It was earned. People used to say I was naturally calm, that I had some kind of gift for keeping my cool under pressure. They were wrong. It wasn't a gift. It was training. And the truth is, most people don't lack calm. They just haven't practiced it. They think it's something you're born with, like a personality type or a genetic trait. But calm is not who you are. It's what you build. Emotional control is a discipline. And like any discipline, it gets stronger with repetition. But we're rarely taught that. We're taught to express everything, to react in real time, to justify every outburst as just being honest or just how I feel. But feelings are not facts, and they don't have to run your life. I started to learn this the hard way. Every time I reacted too fast, I made things worse. A quick snap in a tense moment, a decision made in frustration, a conversation I should have walked away from. And every time I told myself, next time I'll stay calm. But hoping for calm doesn't work. Only training does. So I started training. Not in a dramatic way. In small moments. When I wanted to cut someone off mid-sentence, I stayed silent. When I felt insulted, I paused before replying. When my emotions started to rise, I breathed deeper, slower. I began rewiring my responses, not by force, but by awareness. I started recognizing the triggers, the people, the situations, the internal stories that made me feel reactive. And I asked, what story am I telling myself right now? Is it true? Is it useful? Most of the time it wasn't. And once I separated myself from that story, I could separate from the reaction. That space between emotion and action is where calm lives. And the more I practiced, the more natural it felt. Now, when chaos hits, I don't feel the same urgency to respond. I still feel the pressure, but I don't let it leak into my decisions because I've trained myself to observe before I act. And that's the difference. It's not that calm people feel less. It's that they've trained themselves to pause. It's not that calm people don't get triggered. It's that they've trained themselves not to follow the trigger. So if you think you're just not a calm person, think again. You're just untrained. And training begins now, with one breath, one choice, one moment where you don't let your feelings drive the wheel. Because real calm doesn't come from what's happening around you. It comes from who you've trained yourself to be within it. It took me a long time to realize that every time I reacted, I was giving something or someone my power. A rude comment, a disrespectful glance, a headline designed to provoke. And without thinking, I'd react, defend, explain, get angry. And I thought I was standing up for myself, but I wasn't. I was surrendering, because the moment something outside of me could control me, my mood, my attention, my peace, I was no longer in charge. I was obeying it. Most people think power is loud. They think it shows up in responses, comebacks, debates. But I've learned the opposite is true. Power is quiet. Power doesn't flinch. Power doesn't need to prove itself. If you want to know where your power leaks, look at what makes you react, what pulls you out of character, what forces you into conversations you don't want to have, what keeps you explaining yourself to people who are never listening in the first place. Every time you react emotionally to something meaningless, you lose a little bit of control. And over time, those little bits add up. I used to justify it. They disrespected me. They're wrong, and I need to set the record straight. I can't just let this go. But I could, and more importantly, I should have, because every reaction was a distraction from my peace, from my purpose, from my power. You don't need to respond to everything. You don't need to match every energy. You don't need to attend every argument you're invited to. You only need to ask, is this worth the power it's costing me? If the answer is no, let it go. Silence doesn't mean surrender. It means mastery. Now, when someone tries to provoke me, I stay still, not because I'm afraid to speak, but because I choose not to. Not every situation deserves my energy. Not every comment deserves my attention. Not every fight is worth the dent it would leave in my focus. What you react to, you obey. And I don't obey chaos anymore. Instead, I observe, I detach, I decide consciously what gets my time, my voice, my energy. And when I do speak, it matters, because it's no longer a reaction. It's a response, measured, intentional, strong. The person who reacts to everything is easy to control, but the person who doesn't, the one who stays grounded while the rest of the room loses their grip, that person becomes untouchable. That person leads, and that's the person I've chosen to become. I wasn't born steady. I became that way, one decision at a time. There's this illusion people carry that calmness is a natural trait, that some people just have it, that composure is some fixed part of your personality. But the truth is far simpler and far more powerful. I trained for this. Composure isn't inherited. It's built. Like a muscle, it grows through resistance, through repetition, through challenge. I didn't wake up unbothered. I just got tired of being thrown around by every emotion, every opinion, every unexpected change. So I decided I would become someone who doesn't shake, not because life got easier, but because I got stronger. And that strength started with clarity. You can't be steady if you don't know what you stand for. So I got clear on my values, what matters, what doesn't, what I'll entertain, what I'll walk away from. That clarity became my anchor. So when chaos showed up, and it always does, I didn't have to figure it out in the moment. I already knew who I was. Then came repetition. Every time I faced something that used to throw me off, I practiced staying calm. I practiced pausing. I practiced breathing instead of breaking. And with every repetition, I got better. Not perfect, better. Because composure doesn't mean nothing touches you. It means nothing controls you. Someone insults you, you don't flinch. A deal falls through, you adjust. Plans collapse, you regroup. You don't spiral, you respond. This kind of emotional discipline takes time, and most people don't commit to it. They want peace, but they're unwilling to train for it. They want to be centered, but they live unexamined lives. I trained in silence. I trained in the quiet moments when no one was watching. The early mornings, the traffic jams, the conversations where I wanted to interrupt, but didn't. It didn't look impressive, but every one of those moments was a rep for the mind, a rep for who I was becoming. And the compound effect of that practice? Unshakable presence. I don't rattle like I used to. Not because I don't feel, but because I don't follow every feeling. I've trained myself to choose what gets a response, and when, and how. That's not luck, that's not wiring, that's work. And it's work anyone can do. You start today, with one breath, with one pause, with one moment where you could explode but you don't. Then tomorrow you do it again, and the next day again. Until one day you realize you're not reacting like you used to, you're not panicking like you used to, you're not shrinking like you used to, you've become something different, not cold, not numb, just unshaken. And that's where your real power begins. People love to talk. They'll comment, criticize, provoke. They'll spread their opinions like wildfire even when they know nothing about your life. And for a long time I felt the need to respond, to explain myself, to set the record straight. But every time I did, I felt emptier, not stronger, smaller, until I learned something that changed my entire relationship with power. You don't owe the world a response. Just because someone speaks doesn't mean you have to answer. Just because someone misunderstands you doesn't mean you have to correct them. Just because someone challenges you doesn't mean you need to defend yourself. Let them talk. Let them misjudge you. Let them gossip. Let them assume. Power doesn't come from rebuttal. It comes from restraint. There's a kind of quiet confidence that grows when you stop chasing everyone's approval, when you stop needing to be understood, when you stop reacting to noise, because that's what most of it is, noise, empty words, background static, people filling silence with sound because they haven't learned how to sit in stillness. I used to think silence made me look weak. But now I know it makes me look untouchable. People expect you to bite, to defend, to snap back. And when you don't, it unsettles them, because they realize they don't control you. They never did. You do. I don't explain myself anymore, not to those who've already made up their mind, not to those looking to argue, not understand, not to those who speak just to be heard, not to connect, because every word I give away is energy I don't get back, and I've learned to spend that energy wisely. Now, when I'm misunderstood, I smile. When I'm provoked, I pause. When someone wants a reaction, I offer none, not because I'm scared, but because I'm centered. I know who I am. I know what I stand for. And that means I don't need to perform for anyone's comfort. The strongest people I've ever met weren't the loudest. They were the ones who moved with purpose, spoke when it mattered, held their silence like a weapon. That's who I aim to be. Not someone who wins every argument, but someone who no longer needs to argue. Let the world speculate. Let them fill in the blanks. Let them talk. I'll be over here, doing the work, living the life, and letting results speak for me. Because at the end of the day, the loudest voice doesn't win. The calmest one does. Criticism used to cut deep. Even the small comments stayed with me longer than they should have. I'd replay them in my head. Wonder if they were right. Try to fix myself, not because I believed in growth, but because I craved approval. It took years before I asked myself a simple question. What if their words only hurt because I believed them? That realization shifted everything. See, the pain of criticism doesn't come from the sound of the words. It comes from the weight we give them. If someone calls you worthless and you know deep down it's not true, it bounces off. But if even a small part of you believes it, that's when it stings. That's why the real work isn't in silencing the critics. It's in strengthening your truth. I stopped fighting to be understood. I stopped chasing everyone's approval, and instead I started doing the internal work, building the kind of identity that doesn't crumble at someone else's opinion. Because here's what I've learned. Most people who criticize you are speaking from their own fear, their own frustration, their own limitations. They're not evaluating you. They're projecting themselves onto you. Why would I take that personally? When I learned to detach from their need to understand me, I got my power back. I no longer needed to be liked to feel valid. I no longer needed to be praised to stay motivated. Criticism became data, sometimes helpful, sometimes irrelevant, but never defining. I started asking better questions. Does this person know me? Do they live by the standards I respect? Are they offering truth or just noise? And most of the time, the answer was clear. Their words weren't for me. They were for them, to feel powerful, to feel right, to feel less insecure, if only for a moment. So I let it go. Not because I'm too proud, but because I refuse to be moved by every wind of opinion. I have too much to build, too much to protect, too much self-respect to bend for people who wouldn't do the same for me. This is the discipline of detachment. You don't stop caring, you just stop needing. You stop needing to be seen, to be applauded, to be validated. And in that freedom, you become immovable. Let them misunderstand you. Let them judge. Let them offer their 2 cents. If it helps you, take it. If it doesn't, leave it. But never, ever let it define you. Because the only opinion that can shape your life is the one you've trained yourself to believe. There were days I didn't feel like myself, tired, unmotivated, easily irritated, and on those days I started to believe a lie. This must be who I am. But it wasn't. It was just a mood. And that distinction between who you are and what you feel is one of the most important lessons I've ever learned. Because moods lie. They shift. They speak in extremes. They convince you that your entire identity has changed just because something in your life feels off for a moment. But feelings are not facts, and they are certainly not identity. I used to let a bad morning define my whole day. A single anxious thought would become the lens I saw myself through. Suddenly I was undisciplined, unfocused, weak. But none of that was true. It was just a passing state. And once I started treating it like a cloud, not a cage, everything changed. I stopped reacting to every emotional dip like it meant something about me. I stopped labeling myself based on how I felt in the moment, and I started doing something far more powerful. I let it pass. I allowed space between the emotion and my identity. I'd say to myself, I feel frustrated, not I am frustrated. That small shift in language gave me perspective. It reminded me that moods move, and that who I am is something deeper, quieter, more stable. That part of me doesn't rise and fall with emotion. It observes, it waits, it remains. When I understood that, I stopped giving so much power to temporary feelings. I stopped building stories around every low point. I stopped sabotaging my progress because of one off day. Instead, I got better at sitting with it. I'd acknowledge the feeling, feel it fully, and then let it go without attaching my entire self-worth to it. Because the truth is, emotions are messengers, not definitions. They're signals, they're feedback, but they are not you. You are the one who chooses what to do with them. You are the one who decides whether to listen, to challenge, or to simply observe and move on. And when you make that shift, when you stop identifying with your moods, something amazing happens. You become consistent, even when your emotions aren't. You become grounded, even when your day isn't going to plan. You start showing up as the person you've chosen to be, not the one your emotions try to convince you that you are. That's emotional mastery. That's personal power. And it starts with one truth. You are not your mood. You are not your anxiety. You are not your anger. You are not your low energy or your restlessness. You are the one who notices it all and keeps moving anyway. There was a time when I felt the need to explain everything. Every change I made, every new goal I chased, every boundary I set. I wanted people to understand. I wanted them to support me. I thought if I just said it the right way, they'd come along for the journey. But they didn't. Not always. And that used to frustrate me until I learned this. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your evolution. If something inside you shifts, If you feel called to level up, to walk away, to change your habits or your mindset, you don't need to justify it. You just move different. Because at some point, you realize that words can only take you so far. You can talk about your vision all day, and people will still doubt you, still question you, still try to keep you where they're comfortable seeing you. But action? Action silences all of that. You don't need to prove anything. Just show up differently. Let your consistency speak. Let your presence change the atmosphere. Let your results do the talking. That's when people notice. Not when you explain, but when you move. When you stop showing up to the same conversations. When you stop reacting the way you used to. When you start carrying yourself with a new level of clarity, confidence, and calm. They'll feel it, even if they don't understand it. I've learned that real growth is quiet. It happens in how you carry yourself. How you respond or don't. How you redirect your energy away from proving and into becoming. I no longer explain why I don't engage in drama. I just leave the room. I don't explain why I protect my time. I just don't give it away so easily. I don't explain why I've raised my standards. I simply live by them. And the people who get it, they get it. The ones who don't, they weren't meant to. The need to explain is often a sign that you're still uncertain, still looking for permission. But when your growth is real, when your identity is solid, you stop needing approval. You stop apologizing for choosing a different path. And that's when you become powerful. So if you're in a season of change, let this be your reminder. You don't have to convince anyone. You don't have to make speeches about your transformation. You just have to live it, move with intention, move with clarity, move with peace, and let them wonder what changed. Let them whisper, let them watch. Because in the end, the strongest statement you'll ever make is not your explanation, it's your evolution. There was a time when I thought strength had to be loud, that it looked like dominance, that it sounded like confidence raised to a higher volume. But the deeper I went in life, the more I learned to pay attention, the more I saw the truth. Peace is the real flex, not noise, not drama, not being the most talked about, the most followed, the most seen. Real power lives in stillness, in the calm voice that doesn't rise when provoked, in the steady hands that keep building while others waste energy reacting, in the quiet mind that refuses to be pulled into battles that don't matter. We live in a loud world. Everyone's performing. Everyone wants to be heard, noticed, validated. But the people who move me the most, the ones I remember, they weren't shouting. They were steady, measured, rooted. And I knew just by being near them that they were working with something deeper, something the noise couldn't touch. So I stopped chasing chaos, stopped responding to everything that buzzed for my attention. And I started building my inner silence like it was a home, a place I could live in, not just visit. It's not easy. Stillness requires restraint, discipline, humility. You have to stop proving yourself. Stop needing to win every argument. Stop chasing recognition just to feel like you matter. Because when you're truly at peace, you don't need applause. You don't need permission. You don't even need to be understood. You just are. You know what you value. You know what you stand for. And most importantly, you know what no longer deserves your energy. That's a different kind of wealth. To walk into a room and not be pulled in 100 directions. To hear gossip and feel nothing. To face disrespect and still choose grace. People think peace is soft, but peace is unshakable. It's what keeps your vision clear when the world throws fog in your path. It's what makes you consistent when emotions beg you to drift. Anyone can raise their voice. Anyone can react. But it takes power to pause, to breathe, to respond like someone who knows their value doesn't live in noise. I've seen the loudest people lose everything, because they couldn't master their own stillness. And I've seen the quietest people rise because they refused to be rushed by the world around them. That's who I choose to be now. Not the most noticed, the most centered, not the loudest in the room, the one whose presence says more than their words ever could. Because in a world that runs on chaos, the one who stays calm holds the real power. I used to think I had to speak to be powerful, to be heard, to make an impact. I thought silence meant weakness, like I had nothing to say, or worse, nothing worth saying. But I was wrong. Over time, I learned the opposite was true. Silence is a weapon, not a passive one, not an accidental one, a deliberate, practiced form of control. You don't realize how powerful silence is until you use it on purpose, until you sit across from someone expecting a reaction and give them none, until you let a conversation stretch out without filling it with justifications or apologies, until you decide that not everything deserves your voice. Because the more you talk, the more you reveal, not just your thoughts, but your doubts, your patterns, your emotional triggers. But when you stay silent, you keep your position strong. You let others wonder what you're thinking. You let them expose themselves instead. There is strategy in saying less. There is control in not reacting. There is power in being the one who can sit in discomfort without trying to escape it with words. I've used silence in rooms where I once would have pleaded. I've used it in arguments I used to try to win. I've used it in negotiations, in tension, in conflict, and I've watched it shift the entire energy of the moment. Because silence unsettles people. It forces them to face their own noise. It makes them question their assumptions. And most importantly, it makes them listen. I don't need to announce what I'm doing. I don't need to explain my vision or prove my point to anyone not ready to understand it. I let my consistency speak. I let my results speak. I let my presence speak. The words I do choose now, they're intentional. They're calm. They're measured. Because silence taught me that not everything needs a reply. And not every invitation to speak is worth accepting. Most people are afraid of silence. They rush to fill it. They talk too fast, reveal too much, or defend too quickly. But I've learned to breathe in that space, to own it. Because silence, when used with intention, doesn't weaken your presence. It magnifies it. And here's the paradox. The less you say, the more they listen when you do speak. The less you explain, the more they respect your clarity. The less you argue, the more your peace becomes something they can't ignore. So now, when the moment gets loud, I get quiet. Because silence isn't empty. It's charged. It holds weight. It carries presence. And if you know how to use it, it can become the sharpest tool in your arsenal. There was a time I thought confidence came from what I achieved. The wins, the praise, the validation. But no matter how many milestones I hit, my confidence stayed fragile. Because deep down, I was still ruled by my emotions. One harsh comment could ruin my day. One setback could drain my energy. One failure, and suddenly I wasn't enough again. That's when I realized confidence doesn't come from achievement. It comes from emotional control. You can't feel stable if your emotions run the show. You can't trust yourself if every mood swings you into a new identity. You can't build power when you're reacting to every opinion, every delay, every doubt. Real confidence begins the moment you stop being pulled around by how you feel. Because emotions are unreliable. They're like weather, always shifting, always dramatic. And if you live by them, you'll always be chasing your balance. So I started training a different muscle, the ability to stay centered no matter what was happening inside me. That doesn't mean I stopped feeling. It means I stopped believing every feeling, stopped obeying them like they were facts, stopped making decisions in the heat of emotion. Instead, I learned to pause, to sit with what I was feeling without letting it take the wheel. That pause, that small, simple space, became everything. Because once you realize you don't have to act on every impulse, you unlock a deeper kind of strength, a strength that doesn't show off, a strength that doesn't need to be loud, a strength that says, I know who I am, even when my emotions don't. And from that place, confidence builds. You start trusting yourself more. You make clear decisions. You stop over-explaining, over-apologizing, overreacting. You move with calm, with presence, with quiet certainty. Because confidence isn't bravado. It's self-trust. And self-trust is built every time you respond with discipline instead of drama. I stopped letting fear write my emails. Stopped letting insecurity lead my conversations. Stopped letting anxiety steer my focus. I trained myself to see those emotions without becoming them. And that's when I started to feel stable, regardless of circumstances. Because the world didn't have to change for me to feel grounded. I changed. I became someone who doesn't chase confidence. I builds it with every moment of restraint, with every breath before I speak, with every quiet decision to stay in control. And here's the secret. The people who seem the most confident, they're not fearless, they're trained. Trained to feel and still stay steady. Trained to hurt and still move forward. Trained to face the storm and still stay standing. That's real confidence, and it's available to anyone willing to do the inner work. I used to give my attention to everything. Every little distraction, every meaningless argument, every headline designed to make me worry. I'd wake up with good intentions and go to bed wondering where the day went. My mind felt scattered. My peace felt fragile. My progress felt slow. And I didn't understand why until I realized this. Your focus is sacred, and most of what asks for it doesn't deserve it. There are people, platforms, and problems constantly trying to steal your attention. They don't want to build with you. They don't want to elevate you. They just want your energy so they can waste it. And if you're not intentional, they'll succeed. So I made a decision to stop giving my energy away so easily, to stop treating my focus like it was infinite, because it's not. Every time I react to nonsense, I lose momentum. Every time I scroll out of habit, I drift from my path. Every time I engage in drama or petty conflict, I disconnect from what actually matters. And the truth is, the most dangerous distractions don't look dangerous. They look harmless. 15 minutes here, a quick reply there, a little venting to pass the time. But these things compound. They drain the mental clarity I need to build anything great. So I started protecting my focus like I would my home. Not everything gets to come in. Not every notification deserves my glance. Not every opinion gets a response. Not every invite gets a yes. That's not being cold. That's being clear. Because once I realized how valuable my mental space really is, I stopped apologizing for guarding it. I set boundaries not to push people away, but to protect the energy I need to create, to build, to lead. People won't always understand. They'll say you've changed. They'll call you distant, arrogant, even selfish. Let them. Because most people are so used to being distracted, they've forgotten what focus feels like. But when you reclaim it, when you choose it over noise, you become unstoppable. You move faster, think sharper, live with more intention. You start creating from clarity instead of reacting from exhaustion. You start making real progress instead of being busy for nothing. And in that shift, you find your power again. So I ask myself daily, does this deserve my attention? And if the answer is no, I move on. No guilt, no explanation. Because I've learned the cost of misplaced focus, and I refuse to pay it anymore. My vision requires energy. My future requires clarity. My peace requires protection. and all of it begins with what I choose to give my attention to. So now I treat focus like the sacred force it is. Because in a world that profits from your distraction, your focus is not just power, it's freedom. The world isn't getting quieter. It's getting louder, faster, more reactive. People are stressed, stretched thin, and constantly pulled in 100 directions. They're quick to anger, quick to fear, quick to spiral. But in the middle of all that noise, I made a choice. I would be the calm. Not the calm that waits for peace to arrive, the calm that creates it. The calm that doesn't flinch when tension rises. The calm that makes other people feel safe just by walking in the room. Because when everything around you spins and you don't, you become something rare. You become unshakable. That's not an accident. It's not personality. It's a trained response. It's built in quiet mornings when no one's watching, in the habit of deep breathing when your instinct is to explode, in the discipline of choosing your presence before choosing your words. Being the calm doesn't mean you ignore reality. It means you lead in it. While others panic, you pause. While others attack, you observe. While others overreact, you stay anchored to truth. And that doesn't make you passive. It makes you powerful. Because in chaos, everyone is looking for a center, someone to ground the moment, someone who doesn't add more fire but brings the temperature down. That can be you. If you're willing to let go of your ego, if you're willing to stop proving, if you're willing to step back and see the bigger picture, not just what was said, but why it was said, not just the problem, but what it's really pointing to. When you stop reacting to life and start responding to it, you begin to move differently. Slower maybe, but with more intention, with more awareness, and with far more impact. I've had people yell at me, try to pull me into chaos, and I've stood still. Not because I didn't feel the heat, but because I knew I didn't have to carry it. That's what most people miss. You can witness chaos without becoming it. You can feel emotion without letting it drive the car. That's leadership. That's maturity. That's peace. So now, no matter what happens, I ask myself, who do I want to be right now? Not, what do I feel like doing? Not, what do they deserve? But, who am I training myself to become? And every time I choose stillness, I get closer. The world will always spin. But you don't have to. You can be the eye of the storm. You can be the anchor in the noise. You can be the one who turns heads without raising your voice. Because when you carry calm in chaos, you don't just protect your peace, you become a source of peace for others. And that, in this loud world, is the ultimate power.